Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Living Schoolyards Act lecture series, exploring the benefits to health, education, community, and climate. We're so glad you could join us today. I'm Rachel Pringle, the Director of Strategy and Operations at Schoolyards America, and I'm joined by my colleagues Lauren McKenna, who will be managing the chat today, and Dante Sudalovsky, who is running our tech today. And please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and where you're from and any other information you'd like to share. Next slide. So the reason we're here today is to celebrate this, the potential of this new act that has been introduced in the United States Senate, and it's called the Living Schoolyards Act. It's a groundbreaking bill that will direct important federal resources toward transforming school grounds into living schoolyards, richly layered outdoor environments that strengthen local ecological systems while providing place-based, hands-on learning resources of all ages. It's incredibly exciting to see this bill in the federal record. It is a huge opportunity to equitably improve the educational experiences and health of children across the country. Some background on the bill. The Living Schoolyards Act was introduced in the United States Senate by Martin Heinrich of New Mexico in September of 2022. Senator Heinrich will be reintroducing the bill this spring, potentially next month, as well as Representative Gabe Vasquez, also from New Mexico, will reintroduce the bill in the House. So right now, we really need bipartisans, co-sponsors in the House and Senate. So we really hope that today will inspire everyone to reach out to your senators and congresspeople about this bill. There is a link on next slide. Coming up here that we'll share that where you can find more resources to reach out to your senators. So the goals of this lecture series is first to build a grassroots community of active support for the bill, as I just mentioned. We know that living schoolyards and being outdoors in nature offer tremendous physical and mental health benefits to children. There are also proven climate and ecological benefits, as well as community and green job benefits that we will discuss in subsequent lectures in this series. The next goal is to unite and grow a coalition of organizations. Within the coalition we are building around this bill, there's a huge amount of knowledge, expertise, and on-the-ground experience. This lecture series will bring together and draw on that expertise. If you are an organization that's participating today and you have not endorsed the bill, we encourage you to do so. And again, we'll share that link in just a second. And of course, the main goal of this series is to highlight the many benefits of living schoolyards and to create a library of recorded testimony. This library can be used by elected officials and their staff to understand the benefits of this legislation, and can be used anytime anyone needs to advocate and educate about the benefits of living schoolyards. Next slide. So how can you support the bill? Please visit our website. We have a website on the Living Schoolyards Act where you can endorse the bill. You can write a letter to your Congress. We have templates for you. We have a student advocacy kit where teachers, you can download this kit, and there's a template letter in there and other ways your students can be involved in thinking around green schoolyards or living schoolyards at their school site. Follow us on social media. Write an op-ed for your local paper about the Living Schoolyards Act and its power and potential. And finally, visit your senators and congresspeople or write those letters. Next slide. This is a really fun example of a teacher from Gulf Avenue Elementary in Los Angeles Unified School District who has shared with us her student letters that she has sent to her congresspeople here in California. Next slide. We're so grateful to Abby and Shayla and Evelyn and the other students who wrote letters to their congresspeople about why they would like a living schoolyard in their school. And so this is a great example of some students using our student advocacy. Thank you all for doing that. Next slide. So today we are really excited to host our second lecture in a 5-part series focused on the educational and academics benefits, as well as the mental and physical health benefits, which is what we're focusing on today, and the many other benefits of living schoolyards. The recording will be available We are recording this session today, and we will post that on our website after within a week of this series. Today, our focus, as I said, is on the health benefits of living schoolyards and of the act when it becomes law. Our speakers today come from the fields of medicine, landscape architecture, and child development. Together, they bring decades of experience in the field of human and nature connection and a wealth of knowledge. Time is always short, and we apologize for limiting their presentations so much. Please read their bios in the chat and follow the incredible work that each of them and their organizations are doing. As you listen to our speakers, feel free to post questions in the chat. Our Schoolyards America team will respond when we can, and we will also have time at the end for questions and answers. We'll also be posting research links in the chat and afterwards on our website, along with the lecture recordings. So I would like to now introduce our first speaker, who is Dr. Stacy Beller Stryer, who is a pediatrician and associate director of natureprescribed.org. And you can read her full bio in the chat. And so Stacy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, thank you so much for the introduction. And again, my name is Stacy Beller Stryer, and I am a pediatrician and the associate medical director for natureprescribed.org. Today, I'm going to be talking about the physical health benefits of nature and living schoolyards. And I recently had the pleasure of working with some middle school students in Washington, D.C., and bringing them outside to a nearby park where they could experience the benefits of nature and where we were able to talk about health benefits of nature. So natureprescribed.org or parkerxamerica.org, we do things like talking to students, we speak with schools, wellness organizations, and probably mostly with healthcare professionals about the health benefits of being outside in nature. And we provide a platform where we educate healthcare professionals and others on the benefits of nature and how to write nature prescriptions. So why am I talking about this today? I'm talking about, I'm talking about it because over the past several decades, children have become much more sedentary as we've had the advent of computers and cell phones and much more that's on television. The average time that a child spends outside in free play nowadays is 4 to 7 minutes a day. In front of a screen is 6 or more hours a day. And a child is 6 times more likely today to play a video game than they are to ride a bike. And we're seeing at the same time that children are becoming more sedentary, the increase in many chronic health conditions that are concerning. We've seen over the past several decades increase in childhood obesity, and we're seeing it much more in the underserved populations and those at risk, where about 25% of the non-Hispanic Black population and the Black population has suffered childhood obesity. One of the big issues with this is that 80% of children who are obese remain obese as adults. So it's very difficult to treat someone who has become overweight. And at such a young age as age 5, any child who's overweight is 4 times more likely to become obese. The rate of obesity is inversely correlated with socioeconomic status and educational level. And obesity is associated with an increased risk of many chronic conditions that increase morbidity and mortality, including diabetes, stroke, hypertension, cancer, and mental health issues. Greenness is an environmental justice issue, and it directly affects the physical health of ourselves and our children. Lower socioeconomic and non-white neighborhoods have fewer parks, public green space, and street cover. And greenness is associated with income, education, and house ownership. So those of higher income, education, and own houses are much more likely to have a greener surrounding and a school with greenness. That directly affects heat-related illness, chronic diseases, heat stroke, respiratory conditions, and cardiovascular effects. And we are seeing effects of climate change and extreme weather conditions. And that also, when you have areas that are less green, people have much more serious conditions such as heat-related events, infectious diseases after floods, and other problems that are associated with lack of greenness. I was pre-pandemic part of Governor Hogan's Green Classroom Task Force. And in that realm, what I did is I went around Montgomery County, which is the county I live in, Maryland, and looked at some of the green spaces and the living schoolyards. And I was really shocked to see the schoolyard on the right here. That's in Silver Spring, Maryland. It's an underserved population. You can see that this is a, area of concrete with one play structure, and actually half the play structure didn't work. The slide had cracks in it and couldn't be used. And you can see there are no trees there. So when it's hot in the spring or the summer or early fall, there's really no place to go. And right nearby, about 5 minutes away, I saw a school here on the left that received a grant for a green schoolyard, living schoolyard, and it was incredible. They had pollinator gardens, they had gardens where they raised lettuce and tomatoes and made salad. They had serenity gardens, and every classroom was somehow involved in making the schoolyard better. And they had benches for teachers and for kids to hang out. It was really beautiful. And on the right here is a picture of a private school nearby where the children spend about half their time outside in living classrooms and also just in playtime. And you can imagine how great the physical development is when they climb on these structures. There are numerous studies that show the benefits of being outside and living schoolyards and just greenness in general. And in this same day that I brought the children out, the middle schoolers out, we talked about health. And we talked about how greenness and nature affects their health. And the kids were really into being outside and playing. This was after school where they were exhausted, but they really enjoyed their time outside and looking around and learning about health benefits of being outside. So what are some ways that being outside helps us? There are many ways, and I'm going to go through this quickly. I could spend probably an hour on each, but I'll try to do this very quickly. I think a major way is decreased BMI, which is called basal metabolic index, and decreased risk of development of obesity. Obesity is a major preventable risk factors of many other adverse health conditions. And I don't know how many of you are aware, but the American Academy of Pediatrics recently came out with recommendations for early aggressive treatment to prevent obesity, because prevention is key. Because as I said before, once someone has developed that extra weight, it's very hard to treat it. So some of the studies that have been done, there was one study that I thought was incredibly important, was done in a Head Start program with preschoolers. And they found that increasing outdoor time for these preschoolers actually decreased their BMI. And the more time these children spent outside, the more their BMI decreased over the school year, and the less likely they were to be obese at the end of the school year. Importantly, those children who were less active at home, lived in unsafe neighborhoods, and who had a higher BMI at the start of the year had greater effect and benefit from being outside. And there are also review articles and other studies that show that access to nature lowers the rate of obesity and depression. Hand in hand with obesity goes increased physical activity. As we know, when you're more physically active, you burn more calories. And there are several studies that have done in schools and schoolyards that show the benefits of being outside on physical activity. One study showed that school grounds that had diverse natural surroundings promoted increased physical activity. And that schoolyards that have shade, as I showed you before, that picture where there was no shade, children were actually more physically active. There was one review study that showed a positive impact of schoolyard greening on physical activity. And they said that schoolyard greening is a viable intervention in reducing the health equity gaps and improving children's health, regardless of their racial or ethnic backgrounds or residential neighborhood socioeconomic status. So we find in study after study that just being outside and having access to green space increases physical activity. There are other ways that physical health is improved from being outside. There's one large study that was done in New Zealand on over 50,000 children that showed that those who lived closer to green space had a 6% less likely chance of developing asthma. And people who live near green space and who have varied vegetation actually have impact on air quality and are less likely to have asthma exacerbations, which would be wonderful for kids who have asthma to have a living schoolyard and be able to go outside and not have increased risk of an exacerbation, something we see a lot in emergency rooms. We also see improved immune function and commensal microbiota. Immune function, our immune system helps us fight off cancer, helps us fight off infections, and keeps us healthy. And there's studies that show, there was one study that was done in an urban setting on school children, and they just left them in an outdoor urban setting, pretty traditional with the concrete and asphalt. And then they also introduced them at another time period to an area, as you could see with this child here, who was playing in the mud, that has a lot of different microbia and a lot of, different microbes that we have in the dirt in many places around the country. And they found that those who were exposed to the dirt actually had better immune function and had more commensal microbiota in our gut and in our skin, which also helps us fight off infection. We also know just from the pandemic that increased time outdoors, because we know that there were a lot of people who, schools that brought their children outside, actually decreases the risk of spreading many infectious diseases. So it can help with that. Other ways it helps, it improves our vision. Being outside actually decreases the risk of developing myopia in children. And as you get older, myopia can actually lead to blindness. So this is very important. And ophthalmologists are big advocates of outdoor time for children. Increases vitamin D levels, which plays a role in bone health, immune function, and disease prevention, and can lower blood pressure in children. And there was one study where children who were average age 10 were bicycling inside, and one had a blank screen while they bicycled, and the other had a view of a forest. And then they reversed it. So it was the same kids on both, who did both screens, but at different time periods. And they found that those who looked at the forest views actually had lower blood pressure than those who looked at the blank screen. And lastly, although I could go on and on, but lastly, we see increased brain development and cognitive development and decrease in ADHD symptoms from being outside and living schoolyards and in green space. Many studies show that being raised in greener neighborhoods and having schools that have green associated with them, green living schoolyards, have better development and cognitive function, especially in the younger children. Something I think that's really important is we also see a decrease in attention deficit disorder symptoms. 9% of children in our population in America have been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. So to be able to decrease their symptoms and to be able to then, when they go back inside, if they've been playing outside, they go back inside and have fewer behavioral symptoms, is really beneficial both for them and for the rest of the class. And they also really enjoyed green schoolyards and living schoolyards more than traditional ones. So I think that's a really important thing to consider. So, just a really quick summary slide. Living schoolyards can improve physical health and decrease environmental inequities by increasing immune function, our microbiota, sense of well-being, activity levels, brain development, etc., and decreasing the risk of so many chronic conditions that we carry over into adulthood and increase our morbidity and mortality. So thank you very much for letting me impart some of this on you.
Thank you, Stacy, so much for that really exciting and hopeful review of some of the research. That's really, really great. Thank you so much. The next we will hear from Claire Latané, who's professor and chair of landscape architecture department at Cal Poly Pomona, and the author of Schools That Heal, Design with Mental Health in Mind. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Claire.
Wonderful. So 50 years of research shows that being in nature or even just viewing nature calms our breath, reduces our heart rates, reduces stress and anxiety, and helps us come together as a community. Starting in 1984, Roger Ulrich's hospital room study found that patients in hospital rooms with views of trees or nature healed faster, and requested less pain medication than patients in rooms with views to sky or brick walls. Our children are experiencing extreme crises today, from eco-anxiety and fear of climate change to concerns about neighborhood violence or school shootings. Students are alarmed by the inequitable systems that education and other systems present today. In 2019, or 2021, actually, a youth risk behavior survey found that students continue to see increasing rates of depression. And this is more extreme for LGBTQ+ youth and female students. 1 out of every 4 female student reported an attempt at suicide the previous year, and nearly 1 out of every 2 LGBTQ youth. Even if students are diagnosed with mental health disorders, such as depression, it's very unlikely that they'll get treatment. Half of youth diagnosed with depression in the last year, out of half of those, 60% never received treatment. So if 50% of youth are not diagnosed and 60% never receive treatment, you can see it's really hard to match them with counselors or caregivers. And teachers are experiencing higher rates of job-related stress than the general US population. 3/4 of teachers reported frequent rates of job-related stress, and over a quarter reported symptoms of depression. Teachers are leaving their jobs at higher rates than the general US population. And this is especially true for Black teachers, with 1 out of 2 reporting thinking about leaving their profession. And this has a big impact on our students, particularly students of color. All students benefit from having teachers of color, and Black students in particular benefit from having Black teachers. So we need to try to help teachers reduce their stress in the classroom as well. We can design schools that help reduce stress, help students and teachers reduce their anxiety levels, bring people together, as Stacy mentioned, increase immune system function, increase physical health, reduce or improve climate resilience in the face of climate change, and improve academic outcomes. We can design schools that heal. And this is really important in today's context. I'm going to share with you 3 main principles that I've found over the last 7 years that help support mental health and well-being for students and teachers. And those are: nurture a sense of belonging, provide nature-filled places, and inspire awe, curiosity, or wonder. And I'll share one example of each since we're on a tight time frame today. First, nurture a sense of belonging. In Lisa Strong's 2019 study of a Los Angeles Unified School District school, she found that outdoor learning could help change teachers' perceptions of students and students' perceptions of themselves. She did a outdoor learning intervention for 12 weeks where teachers took students outside for 30 minutes twice a week. Before the intervention, she asked teachers whether students could learn outside, whether outdoor learning could help students. And while over 3/4% of teachers said yes for engaging students, only half thought that outdoor learning could help struggling students. After the intervention, 100% of teachers thought that outdoor learning could engage students academically, including struggling students. And perhaps more important was how teachers responded to the question, how do struggling students respond in the face of setbacks? And before the intervention, all of the teachers thought that struggling students gave up too quickly when faced with setbacks. After teaching outdoors, no teachers thought that struggling students gave up too quickly. They thought that they bounced back or worked harder. And this shift in perception lasted after they returned to the classroom, with 3/4 of teachers thinking that struggling students bounced back and others thinking that they worked harder or that they got overwhelmed easily. So imagine the impact on students' self-perception of their ability to learn when now no teachers thought that they gave up too quickly. The second principle is to provide nature-filled environments. Rodney Matsuoka did a study of 100 Michigan high schools spread across urban to rural areas and across socioeconomic levels. And controlling for all of those factors, he found that high schools with plenty of green areas around the school and high human activity levels along the street found students were more likely to plan to attend four-year colleges, and they were less likely to engage in student misconduct or student crime. Schools with large open areas, even if they were living grass, like this one on the right, had more students participating in disorderly conduct and fewer students planning to attend four-year colleges. Wide open areas like this that correlate with student crime and disorderly conduct can be changed. Like, this is a very typical high school environment where you have pavement designated for informal or formal sports and fields beyond. And even in a situation like this, we can add trees strategically to provide shade where, for instance, Stacy was talking about students are more active in shaded areas that breaks up large expanses of blacktop or grass to provide a sense of smaller space and helps cool down the schoolyard. This will also help provide views to classrooms if we help teachers and administrators understand that students don't need to be looking at teachers to be learning. In fact, when students daydream and look out the window, they are doing what their bodies are telling them they need to do and relaxing and reducing stress. So an easy way to help improve mental health for students and teachers might be to just start uncovering windows. The third principle is to inspire awe, curiosity, and belonging, or wonder. Dr. Keltner just published a new book, Awe, the New Science of Everyday Wonder, based on over a decade of research, finding that awe helps. When we experience moments of awe, we have higher levels of happiness and joy and reduced stress and depression. The 8 different things that help produce this feeling of awe are nature, is one of the most common experiences, but also music or art, witnessing acts of moral beauty, people helping each other. This idea of collective effervescence, like being at a sporting event together or a concert or just, maybe even a political march where people are joined in this common goal. Spirituality, of course, moments of epiphany, whether small or large, and birth and death. It could be, when we think about schools and the idea of art being culturally relevant for the community that goes to that school, is really important and can be uplifting to students, teachers, and the community. And even very small moments, like adding nature in schoolyards, can help students find these wonderful moments of discovery small creatures. That these places and moments become anchors to hold on to that build place attachment and sense of belonging as well. So these are the three principles with other strategies that can be found in schools that heal, that help create sense of belonging, mental health and well-being. And if we think about applying these principles across a whole school district or city, we really start imagining living schoolyards as places that can promote public health, increase equity and environmental justice, and improve climate resilience. Schools are spread out across districts and cities, so they are an ideal place to start thinking about unpaving and implementing living natural systems to improve physical health and well-being. And this supporting the Living Schoolyards Act can help us apply knowledge and skills that we already know to help improve environmental justice, social justice, and upend centuries of industrial educational models that do little to inspire and heal our children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. Super sobering information from the beginning of your presentation, but very hopeful solutions. Thanks so much. Next up is Dr. Nilda Cosco, who is the co-founder and director of programs at the Natural Learning Initiative at North Carolina State University. And again, all of our speakers' bios will be posted in the chat. With this, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Cosco.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be part of this panel, and this time, I would say, because it seems we are almost ready to make this happen. My presentation is going to look a little bit at child development and how these, I would say, environment and behavior together makes a change or supports the development of children. First, I would like to recognize that we are part of one health. There is nothing that is the health of the environment or the health of the animals and the health of the people. You know, we are one. The health of humankind is interwoven in a single interdependent diverse system. And schools are critical because children spend there a lot of time. So when we look at these living environments, what are we trying to do? So I was looking at words because, of course, English is my second language. And I was looking and saying, what is this wave of naturalization of how we naturalize the environment? Well, looking at the dictionary with, okay, this is to introduce into common use or into the vernacular to cause something to become established as if native, and to bring conformity into nature or with nature. And I would say this is very important because it's conformity with the natural world and conformity with the nature of child development. These are things that are going to go hand in hand. We are talking, as I said, here of something that is really broad, and is environment and behavior or child development in this case. I just want to recognize, you know, all the benefits of the natural outdoor environments. I'm not going to go on these because my colleagues did a better job. But here, some people say this is vitamin G for green or vitamin N for nature. Whatever we call it, we know this is very good for us. So let me talk about how children live and how they develop. I would like to talk a little bit about this perceptual learning issue, that is how the child interacts with environment, because it's a question of what are we creating and how. And I think Claire talked about awe and other behavioral items that we have to take into consideration when we do a design. So, but how this happened is important to bear in mind. There are different concepts. One is the concept of affordance, that is what this environment affords, and how this information go into the life of children, how they pick up this information. So these affordances are the properties of the environment as they relate to the capabilities or the skills of the children. And they have to do with their own capabilities. This is not the same for all children. That's why I think we are all talking about a diversity of environments. And this is why we think that the design of these spaces in nature have an equity value, because they actually support the needs of the children as in the developmental stage where they are, their cultures and their needs. So how this happened? Well, there are exploratory behaviors, and that's why these environments need to be very interactive. As children develop, they learn about the scale of their bodies, you know, and their specialized skills. And then as they learn, they explore, they perform, they do this type of activities. And this is very important because the children do things when the environment is rich. Look at this boy, how efficiently he's taking the spade and coming very with a decisive, I would say, attitude. This is empowering for him because the space was there for him to actually act on. And this is very, very important. So this is a progressive learning of these affordances of capabilities of the environment that support further this exploration of the environment. That is why we need to offer these natural environments that are seasonally changing. So children pick up information through movement and topography. For instance, these children that are running in this mound, the hill as they call it, but they learn about the environment and they learn about themselves. Can I do this? How many times can I go here? Can I run? Can I roll? And so these are the conditions of these very rich environments that go with the development of the child. These learned environmental affordances guide the future behavioral responses in a particular environment. And so this is a very interactive system for all ages, all abilities, the culture of the space, and they are always present. This is important because they create a feeling of permanence. So there is these spaces where there is variability and novelty of behavior because the environment is various, because there are seasonal changes. Sometimes there are leaves, sometimes there are no leaves, sometimes there are flowers, or it depends where I am. Where children can also explore other expressive behaviors, big movements, without the feeling that perhaps, we are going to break something indoors. So these exploratory behaviors are supported by these naturalized environments full of novel information. These spaces represent the place where we live. It's my ecology, the natural and cultural place. I recognize my place, even by the landscape, even by the fragrances, because this experiential learning, in fact, is building reality for children. And so they go into these age-appropriate explorations. And yes, for the boys, has to be a little bit perhaps more athletic and more active. And also these explorations are age appropriate and culturally and community appropriate, where children can celebrate the culture, the storytelling, the special days for celebration. Now, you may say, well, this is very interesting, but how do we do it? And so I have some ideas here to share with you that I think The previous panelists touched on them. So how do we create living environments for system change? And I think this is our opportunity today, and I hope you take it. Well, we need to create these multi-pronged, sustained long-term strategies that to produce a synergy, building the evidence to fuel innovation, offering community participation, extending reach to many, many groups, bringing policymakers into the mix. Of course, these are environments that also need research and evaluation, sustained technical assistance, and as I said, policy innovation. And I think this is critical, and that's why this is very exciting, because we are now reaching this tipping point when a critical mass of knowledge and experience leads to a critical mass of people adopting these practices, because there is a new understanding on the impact of outdoor learning environments for healthy development is there. There is no discussion. The best practices are defined. Demonstration sites are on the ground. We can go and visit several of these. And adoption of new legislation is growing to normalize the practice. This is very, very important. And we need to keep in mind that this is flowing in our lives, even as adults. We are in the best moment to make company to child development from birth, offering diverse natural environments to nurture the children's behavior that will translate into better quality of life, because this is a lifelong process. And I hope you will be with us and adopt these practices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nilda. We really appreciate that explanation and all of the resources and links that each of our speakers has shared today are really valuable and have been shared in our chat and will be shared with the recording of this presentation, just as a quick reminder. Thank you so much, Nilda, and thank you to all of our speakers. We really, really appreciate your time. We have about 10, maybe 12 minutes for question and answer. So please feel free to write a question in the chat or raise your hand. You can use the reactions function at the bottom of your screen to raise a hand, and I will turn it over to Lauren to run the question and answer.
Yes, thank you everyone for all the speakers for your wonderful presentations and everyone who've added comments and questions. So, I mean, I just want to personally say it's some of this information I've heard many times, and I'm always amazed every time I hear it, because this is all wonderful information to help show people how important and meaningful having green schoolyards is. It's not just an extra cherry on top. It really is foundational. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. So one question that Andrew has asked a few times relates to some of the studies that you've each cited and how these studies controlled for socioeconomic factors. And this is a question for any of the speakers, if you'd like to address that.
I can address that. I know I put in the chat Rodney Matsuoka's study of the 100 Michigan high schools, and it was, you know, I'm not a research PhD or researcher with a capital R, but the study controlled for socioeconomic factors and controlled for urban versus suburban environments. And maybe Stacy or Nilda can respond as well.
Yeah, again, I'm also not a researcher, but I know when you do evaluate for socioeconomic status and those factors, a lot of times there are questionnaires or there are interviews with the family. So each study will do it differently. And there are several questions that they may ask in coming to that decision. And I'm sure that there's a list of, you know, questions that are validated because this is a question that comes up a lot in research that are validated for socioeconomic status. And they can be questions like income, occupation, educational level, and kind of economic pressure. You know, how do you feel in terms of your economic status? So there are a lot of questions that are validated that goes into each research study that looks at socioeconomic status.
I would like to comment. In our case, we are very careful on selecting out the samples for our research. We usually aim at having at least 50% of children that are eligible for subsidies. Now, I would like to say this is very important and we need more research, but we have enough to demonstrate the effects on, especially on families that are underserved or underprivileged, to demonstrate that this is working for them. So I would say sometimes research is opportunistic because the databases perhaps are there and researchers take advantage of what is there. But I think it's enough for us to say that these environments really benefit the children and the families that are underserved.
Thank you for sharing that. I think a follow-up question that I have that relates to some questions other people have shared about like the sequence of making this actually happen in real life at their school or in their district is we have so much research and we know these things. And so how do you convince, I shouldn't use the word convince, but how do you like help people grow with you in this idea that this is a good idea? And how do you actually get funding? Someone asked about specifically in rural parts of the country, but in general, to make this a reality. And that's also a question for anyone.
I can start. I think one of the things I try to do in Schools That Heal is organize strategies according to how easy they are and how inexpensive they are. So some of the strategies presented are just require shifts in perception or shifts in thinking. And in addition to those strategies, there are also some conversation starters. Like it's really important that if you're a teacher trying to do this work, that you understand and empathize with the administrators who are responsible for the liability. If you're an administrator, it's really important to understand where the parents are coming from, for instance. If you're a designer, it's really important to understand what kinds of hurdles the teachers are up against. Like, don't expect the teachers to suddenly champion living schoolyards if they've never taught outside. We have to give everyone resources. And I do want to address, rural schools are no greener than urban schools necessarily. Like this is an issue that is across the country in all different types of neighborhoods, suburban, rural, urban. Schools are struggling with this industrial education model. So just because you're surrounded by woods and mountains or prairie does not mean that your school is green.
Very true.
I can comment a bit on that because this is a very important and very difficult question. How do you convince or how you bring this to the school community to be adopted? And I think it's a complex problem that doesn't have only one way to go about. This is working with a very, very ample, wide front where all these other pieces, as I showed in this, my last slide, come together. So there has to be an effort on education, professional development, an effort to bring the parents and the families who are very busy. They want to be part of this, but some of them work 2-3 jobs. And so, but what is the effort? It's small events or activities. We call it micro-learning activities for a parent when they come and pick up the children to experience just a little bit the outdoors with their children. So it's education, it's facilitation, I would say, for the parents, it's education of the teachers, it's allowing the teachers to be free and to enjoy themselves in the outdoors, and then doing the policy work. That is what you guys are doing. And this is fantastic, because we need to be all together doing this work. Only one activity won't solve the problem.
Yeah, I agree that it differs in every community as to how you start this process and this procedure. And I think education is really important. Educating, the teachers and staff may not be aware of the benefits of green schoolyards and how beneficial living classrooms are. So it's some education, and then it's getting maybe a small group of people who are interested, whether it's within the school and the principal or the school board or parents, a group to kind of become a task force in one community, or another community may be a different group that gets things started. And you may want to start out small, or start out with one or two schools that you can then showcase to other schools in the community. So it doesn't have to be this overwhelming, every school gets a living schoolyard, day one. It can be a process.
I do want to address Kathleen and Andrew's comments, and because we're seeing this in Los Angeles region too, this big shift in parks and schools from natural grass to athletic turf and the rubber surfacing. And a big concern, I think, with districts and parks is trying to be more accessible. So we need to do a better job educating district staff and park staff that there are other surfaces, natural surfaces are accessible as well, and that people that might have mobility issues actually benefit as much, if not more, from natural materials. So in order to sort of help, I think the Living Schoolyards Act is actually doing this. It's living schoolyards. It's not greenwashing. It's about natural systems, living systems that provide these multi-benefit, layered responses with all of these physical, mental, climate benefits that go with them. So hopefully you'll see soon more resources. Lauren and Rachel can speak to this on the Green Schoolyards America website that will help you advocate for this.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of things that we'll have free for people, resources and toolkits, as well as I'm seeing people ask for examples and case studies. Do you want to add more to that, Rachel?
Yes. And so we'll keep monitoring if there's any last couple questions, but we should probably, we already have a number of resources on our website, and there have been folks who are participating today who have also shared some great resources. So definitely check out the chat. We will share links and resources that have been shared today with our recording, just so you know, in case you're feeling frantic about trying to get all those links right now. But we have a lot of resources on our website. Green Schoolyards America helped support the National Outdoor Learning Initiative, which was in response to COVID, and getting students and or schools to take learning outside, and with a lot of folks around the country developed a lot of resources. So we have a library that you can access on our website right now that has many, many resources for taking learning outside. If that's something that you might need for your school, if you're coming from a school, or even a district level, we have resources that span that trajectory, from if you're a teacher or a superintendent. So please take a look. We are also embarking on a statewide initiative here in California called the California Schoolyard Forest Initiative, our forest system, which we hope to expand to other states, starting here, and are also creating toolkits related to providing shade for students, child accessible shade where they play. And we'll be posting actually resources within the next few weeks that are related to that, how to select trees, how to take your students outside to learn in a forest, on your schoolyard, and many more resources. So, and Claire has been helping us with that, as well as many others. So we're really excited about those resources. Please stay tuned. So Dante, if you'd share, actually, we have just a few more minutes. I want to just make sure I share the last few slides that let everybody know about our next lectures in this series. We, as I said, are recording this session, and we will be posting that within the next week, along with all the resources. Our next session will be on Thursday, April 20th, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and the focus will be on climate and ecological benefits, and it will feature Elizabeth Soper from the National Wildlife Federation and our own Sharon Danks, the founder and CEO of Green Schoolyards America. The series will continue with 2 more sessions in May, so stay tuned. And in the last slide, we just want to make another plug to please go and contact your senators and your congresspeople. The Living Schoolyards Act. As we mentioned, it will be reintroduced into the Senate and introduced in the House in most likely April, hopefully this spring. And this is obviously, as we all know, a bipartisan and important issue. So please contact senators, no matter what state you're in, and let them hear from you. And we have many resources on this website to help you in that. Thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate our speakers today, Nilda, Stacy, and Claire, for all of your expertise and wisdom, and to everybody who participated and shared resources and comments in the chat. Thank you for being here with us today. We really appreciate it, and we hope that we will see you again on April 20th.